Joining me on the show today is Ron DeHaas. In 1992, Ron lost his wife and two children in a fatal car accident. After suffering such tragic loss, he decided to devote his life to developing resources for the protection and betterment of family. Realizing the threat that online technologies pose without proper monitoring, he founded Covenant Eyes Incorporated, an internet software company that helps men and women overcome porn addictions. Today, Ron serves as the CEO of the company, is the director of Nehemiah Ministries, and sits on the board of National Center of Sexual Exploitation in Washington, D.C. I'm so honored to have him here with me today to share his story. Ron, welcome to the show.
Adrienne, it's really a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. So your story goes way back. It really starts back in the 90s when you had several years of life-altering events that most people may never even experience one of those in their life, and you experienced multiple big, difficult events in your life. So let's just go back to the 90s and start with your story there.
I would go back to 1990, when everything was fine. I had what would have to be called a perfect family. Mm-hmm. My wife and two children. I had a boy and a girl, which is sometimes referred to as the $1 million family, mm-hmm. So in 1990, I had that perfect family. I was attending a really good church that I had a strong relationship with. In fact, I was an elder in that church, and I knew the pastor and his family well. But then in 1991, he abandoned his family, and he totally abandoned them and left his wife and three children without a husband and father in a very tragic situation. And that was a blow not only to his family, but to my family as well. We were very close with their family.
Yeah.
And then in 1992 was August 21st of 1992 at about 10 a.m. was the point at which I divide my life into the before and after. And that is the moment that my family died in a car accident. They were stopped on the highway for another accident, actually, that had backed up about a mile. And a tanker truck carrying kerosene came up behind them at highway speed, never slowed down. And when the collision happened, their gasoline tank exploded and they were all killed instantly.
Wow.
So that obviously was a tragedy.
How old were you when that happened?
Pardon me?
How old were you when that happened?
I was 43 when that happened.
And
in 1992.
On that day, you probably do remember where you were, what you were doing, like a phone call, like take me to that time when you found out.
I was working in Kalamazoo, which was about 30 miles from my home. My wife was on her way to do some shopping at 10 a.m. on a Friday morning. Beautiful day, sunny day, Friday morning. And that's when the accident happened. The fire was so hot from the explosion that the police and fire people couldn't get to the car to identify it for over an hour. And so really it was about 1 o'clock when they even identified it as being my car using the VIN number on the windshield. My pastor, actually the state police came to my house. They didn't even know who was in the car. At that point, they couldn't even tell who was in the car. The state police came to my house looking for me, not knowing whether I was in the car or not.
Right.
And a neighbor told them what church I went to. And so they went down to the church, which was in Marshall, Michigan, and found my pastor there. And he came back to my house with them. He didn't know where I worked because it was a new job. but he actually broke into my house and found some paperwork from my office, and so he called my office. My pastor called my office, and when I got the call from him, I picked up the phone and said hello, and there was nothing. It was dead. He didn't know whether or not I was in the car or not.
Right. He's calling to see if you're going to be answering the phone.
Yep, that's exactly right. And so when I answered the phone, he was speechless. And so I hung up. And then about a half hour later, the state police brought him to my office. And about a half hour after that phone call, I was called down to the conference room of the office. And that's where my pastor actually was the one who told me about the accident. And a state policeman was there as well.
And I can't even imagine how you respond to news like that. It's hard enough when I've known people that have maybe lost a child or lost a spouse, but this was your entire family. Like, what happens in that moment when you get news like that? Like, are you in shock? Like, what happens?
Shock, yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting. In the book of Job in the Bible, it talks about Job losing his family and his entire family. And Job chapter 1, verse 20 says that Job fell to the ground. And that's exactly what happened to me. I literally fell to the ground, and I was there for about 45 minutes. I guess you'd have to call it, in one sense, you'd have to call it shock. But it's an interesting thing because I had strong faith. I was a strong Christian before the accident. And when I heard that news and I fell to the floor, in the book of Job, it doesn't stop there. It says Job fell to the floor and worshiped. It's a Hebrew word, shahah, and it's only used in the Old Testament in situations where it's the most profound sense of worship. And at the time, I don't think I would have called it worship, but looking back on it, it really, I fell to the ground and I worshiped. And that really is what happened to me.
So it's interesting. I want to talk more about that, because what happens to a lot of people, even people of faith, if their whole family was taken from them, I think many people, and believer, non-believer, would be questioning God, would be angry at God, would be not worshiping. And so I want to talk about that. Like, why didn't you get angry? Why didn't you question? Or did you have those moments where you did? Like, take me through those days and those weeks and what you were going through and how you were able to not be like, I'm done with you, and walk away from God like this, like, and be bitter and angry.
Yeah, that's a great question. I did not feel anger. I really didn't question God. My faith was strong enough that I really believe God's in control. That if God is God, He's in control of every atom in the universe, and so He is in control of all things. And for some reason, He allowed that accident to happen. And I know that's hard to understand, but in the time that followed, it's a human tragedy. There's no doubt, and I don't mean to diminish the grief that I felt and the shock that I felt, but there, in the time that followed, my pastor, the one who told me about the accident to begin with, for the coming months, the next couple of months, he said that God drew Himself so close to me that you could almost see His footprints in the carpet. And that's how he described it.
Wow.
He was so real.
Wow.
And as I look back, and I've said this before, that if we could, what's the best time of our life? And from a human standpoint, a tragedy like that can't be described as the best time of your life. But from a divine perspective, I think the best time of our life must be the time that we're closest to God here on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And those moments were the time I was closest to God. And so there is a sense in which that was, from a divine perspective, the best time, not the worst time of my life, as tragic as it was.
What did, when you say, your faith got you through it, your relationship with God got you through it, what does that tangibly look like? Does that look like prayer? Does that look like reading your Bible? Does that look like going to your pastor and getting support from them? Like, if someone is in that place of just deep grief and they're like, I don't want to be mad at God. I want this to bring me closer to him, but I'm hurting and I'm upset but I don't want to be this. Like, what does that tangibly look like?
Yeah.
I know it's hard to answer.
It's hard to answer, but you mentioned the Bible, and I'd have to say that there were dozens of verses, at least, maybe hundreds of verses that people gave me, that people told me about. And as I read those verses, one that comes to mind certainly is Psalm 30. Weeping may last for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. He turned my mourning into dancing. And so those verses just really resonated with me, because I already was at the place, and that's just where I was in my faith, and still am, that I recognize God is in control of everything, and somehow he allows these things to happen. People ask, why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? And the fact is, death faces us all.
Yeah.
That's inescapable. And so, the time and place is really up to him and not me.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't understand why some people get to live for 100 years and some for 3.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah.
It's a hard thing to wrap our mind around.
My daughter was 7. Here, I have a picture. I'll show you. So there's a picture of my family.
Wow.
And that, my daughter was 7 years old. This was taken shortly before the accident. My daughter was 7. My son was 4. And that's my wife. She was 34. So, that's, and as I look back, I think there's such a human element of what happened to me, that, we, as humans, we have a tendency to make memorials of things, which I think is appropriate. And that moment, as I said, that moment, 10 a.m. on that Friday, was just a turning point in my life.
Yeah.
And so, there's, and I still keep, here's another thing, another artifact I'll share with you is these 6 coins were recovered from the car.
Wow.
That was on fire.
They are very, very charred.
Yeah. Yep. And so those 6 coins are a memorial to me. Yeah. That really means something. And so, there's such a human side to a tragedy like that. But nevertheless, the fact is, God redeemed it a year later as God gave me another perfect family, actually.
Well, it's what comes to my mind with what you just said is many people would go through that would go through something like that, or even something similar, would think this is the end, and how could I keep going on? How could there ever be anything good to come from this? And you're like, then God gave me a second beautiful family. So take me through that process. You're grieving the family that you had, that you love, that you adore. and then moving through that grief, and then take me through the rest of what
Yeah,
happens next.
sure. I think that the future is the foundation of grief.
Mhm.
We grieve. I had several people in my life die before I lost my family. My dad, when I was 10 years old, I had a couple of close friends who died over the years, but I didn't really have significant lifelong plans with them. My dad, when I was 10 years old, a 10-year-old kid just doesn't fully understand what the future will be with your parents. And so I didn't have a sense of grief with those losses that I had with my family.
Right.
And as I understood that, shortly afterwards, actually, I understood that because I had plans. I had a lifelong plan with my family. I
Yeah.
loved. I talked about it as being. I lost not only my wife and my daughter and my son. I lost family.
Yeah.
It was almost like a fourth person that I
Right.
lost was that family.
Yeah. Your future
And
dreams and plans and all the things you wanted
that's
for them.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so really the future is the foundation of grief, without which
Mm.
there isn't much hope either. And so as I missed family, I was not looking for a wife. I really wasn't actually actively looking for a wife, but a year after the accident, there was a wedding that at my church, and uh, my former pastor, the pastor who left his family, came to dinner. She came to dinner, and we had dinner together. And uh, though my wife was a good friend of hers, I didn't know her that well, but we just really struck it off, I guess is what you'd say.
Mhm.
And of course, we knew a lot about each other. She knew me and my family. She knew my family, and uh, I had taught her kids in Sunday school. I knew her kids very well. And I knew a lot about her too, because I knew her husband. I was friends with her husband.
Mhm.
And so it was actually, I would not recommend this for most people, but it was easy for us to get married and fall in love and get married. And so really 6 weeks after we went to dinner, we got married. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. That's
Yep.
pretty intense.
Yeah.
That's pretty
And so
fast.
that was 1 year later. It was just 1 year later. And then
And how old were her kids at that time?
her kids were 11, 9, and 7.
Okay. So a little bit same age as your daughter, and then a little bit older.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then I also a year later we had another child. So we now have 4. No, that's so God has really blessed us. Every August, 1991 was the August when her husband left, and then 92 was my family, and then 93 we went out to dinner, and 94 Abigail was born.
Wow.
So it was.
Wow. So August is a pretty significant month in your life.
It is. Yes, it is. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But all that to say, I just so deeply missed family that it was easy to step right into
Yeah.
that family, and now they are my family. That's for sure.
Well, and they had that missing piece of their father and that
Absolutely.
family, and you had the missing piece, and so the two of you guys coming together completed what you felt was missing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's
Yep. That's
beautiful.
right.
So
the title of your podcast is Resilience, and for me, I found that resilience came from God and not me.
Yeah. Yeah. I have it's called the Resilience Playbook, and I put like 10 things in there to help build resilience. And one of those things is to fill your mind with truth. And it sounds to me like that was a big part of your grief recovery, is that you just held on to the truth of what you knew and
certainly
didn't stray from that.
Yep. That's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So take me to what's next. I mean, I know you've got big things for today. So what's the gap between you get remarried, you have this new, wonderful, completed family, and so what does life look like and how do things go from there?
Starting from that moment that I lost my family, really, I just had a real passion for families. And after getting married, I had a settlement from the trucking company, actually, and I wasn't sure how to invest that. I started a ministry for pastors and missionaries, a retreat and counseling center, uh, and that still is functional, Nehemiah Ministries. But by the year 2000, I had by the year 2000, I had two teenage sons.
Mm.
They were her sons, of course, but they were my sons. I
Yeah.
had two teenage sons, and my household got on the internet in December of 1999. And very quickly, I realized the dangers that were on the internet of pornography specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And after losing my family, I wasn't going to lose another family to pornography.
Yeah.
I just wasn't going to do that. I realized even early on in 2000 that pornography uh, impact is too light a word. It tears apart relationships of all kinds,
Mm-hmm.
relationships of a husband and wife, a person and his family, uh, your work, whatever ministry you have, whatever you do in the world, it impedes all of those relationships,
Mm-hmm.
and even your relationship with God, whatever your relationship with God is, it impedes that relationship because it becomes the focus. Anytime there's a secret life like that in your life, it impacts all of those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And so I realized that I didn't want that for my kids.
Yeah.
And the only thing out there at the time were really bad filters that would just simply block access to sites.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted something more than that. I wanted something that would build a relationship rather than tear it down. Something that would almost be an over the shoulder experience, where you can't be there every minute when your kids are on the internet.
Yeah.
But
Especially today with phones and all the
that's
things
right.
in their back pocket. You can't even
Yeah.
be there every minute. Mm-hmm.
It's a lot harder today than it was even then. That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And so I had a brilliant young guy working for me. He was only 17 years old at the time, but and by the way, he had an ulterior motive. He was after my daughter, and they did get married, and he's also the father of two of my grandchildren.
Oh.
So his name is Colin, and Colin was only 17 years old, but at 17 was truly an expert in telecommunications of all kinds.
Hmm.
He's the one who got me on the internet to begin with, and I asked him if he could somehow keep track of what websites I go to, in an accountability type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And he said, "Oh yeah, I can do that." And
Mm.
so 3 days later, he did something on my computer, and 3 days later, he presented me with a list of all the sites that I had gone to. And so I went into business with the 17-year-old kid, uh, and started Covenant Eyes. I had no idea what it was going to lead to, but now we have 300,000 people using this accountability program that we've
Wow.
developed. So that was 23 years ago.
Wow. Well, I heard someone say once, I can't remember who it was, but it was a pastor or some sermon I was listening to or something, and they were talking about addiction, and they were saying that like porn addiction is different than other addictions
Mm-hmm.
because the other addictions, if I'm remembering this correctly, what he said, it's just like you just want more of what you were doing, but with porn, it's like you need it to keep getting different and changing and becoming more like, and so it becomes like darker and darker and like it's different than the other addiction. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that and all the work that you've done around it. Like how
Yeah.
is that addiction like all addictions tear families apart, right? All addictions hurt the person and the people around them. But how is porn addiction different than the others?
It is. It is the same in one sense. Medical images, X-ray images, and so on will actually show that the part of the brain that is measurably influenced by cocaine is the same area of the brain that is measurably influenced by pornography use.
Wow.
You can actually measure it.
Wow.
It is valid to say, even though it's not included in the psychology books as an addiction, it clearly is an addiction. It has the same medical imprint on your brain as the worst addiction. And so what you said is true. It's not only when you say it's different from other addictions, you could say it's worse in that sense. It's actually worse because, well, for a number of reasons. Number one, it's free and it's easily accessible.
Yeah.
You and I could be sitting here watching pornography while we're doing this. It's free. It's accessible. And it draws people in. It is addictive. It just draws people in, and so it certainly is different from cocaine because you got to go out and buy cocaine.
Yeah, you got to have the money for alcohol. You got to have the money for
and the
cocaine.
Same for alcohol. That's exactly right.
You got to have a way to access it. Yeah.
But beyond that, what you said is absolutely true. That cocaine, you want more cocaine, but it's still cocaine. And with pornography, though, you want bigger pornography. You want different pornography, something new. And in fact, in many cases, not in all cases, fortunately, but in many cases, it leads people to actually act out on people and commit violent crimes. It is another aspect of it that's different is because it's so easily accessible. The age of addiction is lower than it would be normally for a lot of drugs, alcohol and cocaine, for instance. By the time kids are 12 years old, they have been exposed to pornography. It is a very rare 12-year-old who has not seen pornography. And we have a scholarship program where they answer an essay question on what their struggles with pornography have been. And over again, they start with, I was addicted to pornography by the time I was 12 years old.
Wow.
As young as 6. We had one entrant this year. We had 850 entrants, and almost all of them began that way. I struggled with pornography. I was addicted to pornography by the time I was 12. And so that's one of the tragedies of pornography is beyond the other differences, this pornography is in fact the sex training that's going on with our kids. This is boys watch it and understand, oh, this is how I'm supposed to treat a girl.
Right.
And girls watch it and say, oh, this is how I'm supposed to be treated.
Right.
And it leads to sexual exploitation of all kinds.
Yeah. I'm in a Facebook group that is run by a gentleman who is a police officer in a school. And he posts all kinds of stuff in there about like what to do with your kids, what not to do with your kids. These are problems. And every time he brings up the topic of pornography, the comments in there are so polarizing. You have the parents that believe exactly what you just said. This is teaching my son that this is the way he's supposed to treat women. This is teaching my daughter that this is the way that she's supposed to be, treated and interact with a man. And then you've got the other half of the parents that are like, this is normal. This is no big deal. This is how, my son or daughter learns about their sexuality. Like, this is an opportunity, for us to have a conversation with them, which the truth is most of them are not probably having conversations. Right. And I'm always so surprised by, I can't say it's a 50-50 split because I've never counted the responses, but it is truly there's two different thoughts here amongst people of like, this is very damaging, this is awful, we need to protect our children. And then they're the ones that are like, this is normal, what's the big deal? So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
There are a lot of people who believe that pornography actually is okay. One thing I would say to them is that the pornography industry is founded on sexual exploitation. The people who are involved in pornography are being exploited. I've talked to many survivors of the pornography industry because of my relationship with the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. In every case, they talk about how they were lured into it. They were lured into producing pornography, sometimes in steps. The first one would be just taking pictures. You're a beautiful model, and we'll take pictures of you. And then it just degenerates into hardcore pornography. They get lured into it, and in addition to that, very often they are introduced to drugs as well. Because sometimes when they're asked to do things that are painful, drugs help them overcome that pain. And as a result, they become addicted to drugs and alcohol. And many of them are literally dead by the time they're 30 years old.
Wow.
There was one particular one that I knew pretty well, who was in pornography. She was in pornography films and also prostitution. And she ended up committing suicide because she just couldn't handle her life. It was just too difficult for her. And that's the story. And so what people need to realize is when they click on pornography, there are people who are profiting from that. Even if it's free, they're still profiting from those clicks. And that profit is going toward sexual exploitation of other people. And so every time we view pornography, we actually are participating in sex trafficking.
You're not just hurting yourself or hurting your marriage or hurting relationships. Like, you are perpetuating the fact that this even can happen. I spent 3 days with Tim Tebow recently, and he has the Tim Tebow Foundation that is, an anti-sex trafficking foundation. And he was saying that, I just lost my train of thought around that. I was going to say something about he was saying that the largest group of people who watch pornography are middle-aged white men. And he was talking specifically about child sexual exploitation. And so he's like, this only exists because there's people who are clicking, like you said, and watching and participating, because if there wasn't a demand for it, then these children wouldn't be, not that it would completely eradicate it, because there's always prostitution and other things, but and obviously that's not the only group of people that are watching it, but it's the largest group of people. And I was really surprised by that. And I think that a lot of people, especially the people that I've talked to or had conversations with it, do think that it's just innocent and it's normal and boys will be boys and it's not harming anything. But I think that it's very short-sighted for them to be thinking about, it's not hurting me. They're not even thinking about the fact that what you just said, every time you click on it, every time you watch it, you're basically supporting what's happening to the people that are participating in it.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And of course, you're also using another person's body. That's just contrary to normal civilized behavior. It really is. But even beyond that, I think it's becoming a really maybe a civilizational problem. And I'll explain why I say that. In 1941, there was a Kinsey study on sex. And in that Kinsey study, it was reported that less than 1% of men 18 to 32 had erectile dysfunction, ED.
Mm-hmm.
In 1992, there was another study, and these studies were all more or less peer reviewed. Actually, the least peer reviewed was the Kinsey study. But in 1992, there was a study that indicated that perhaps 6% of men 18 to 32 had ED. Starting in 2012, there were, in 2012, 2013, and 2014, there were 3 peer-reviewed studies. One of them was by the Navy that showed that for men aged 18 to 32, upwards of 30%
Wow.
of men 18 to 32 have ED. There was an article in the Time magazine of April 2016, the 2016 April Time magazine, that interviewed 3 young men, Gabe Deem, Noah Church, and Alexander Rhodes. And all 3 of them talked about the effect that pornography had on their lives. They said, you can put the warning for cigarettes on the cigarette package saying Surgeon General's warning, cigarettes may be harmful to your health.
Yeah.
You don't need that warning to tell you that why your 70-year-old grandmother died of lung cancer because she smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
Mm-hmm.
That you don't need that warning. And in the same way, those 3 men said, I don't need any scientific studies. I don't need anyone to tell me why I have ED. I know why. Mm. It's because it's of pornography. With pornography, I have no problem. And then in the same frame of mind, I'm with my wife or girlfriend, and I can't have sex.
Wow.
And they said it is clearly pornography. Mm-hmm. And so upwards of 30% of young men.
That's significant.
Back in the year 2000, when I first started Covenant Eyes, the ads for Viagra were typically old men selling to old men. But now you listen to those ads, and it's young men, and the target market is young men.
Yeah.
And so that is the result of pornography. And so that becomes what I said, a civilizational problem. If people aren't having kids, civilization ends, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any connection? I know where I live right outside of Nashville, and there's like testosterone clinics popping up everywhere. And it's like, men, come get more testosterone, get more testosterone.
Absolutely.
Is that linked to that in any way?
Absolutely it is. Sure. Yeah.
Wow.
Men are feeling that lack, that pornography just sucks the life out of relationships. It just sucks the life out of relationships.
Yeah. So for people who are listening that aren't familiar with Covenant Eyes, talk to me more in depth about how it works. Like, what's the process and what does it do? And like, how is it making a difference?
Yeah, sure. Well, here's how it works. When you get what's called an ally, an accountability partner, it is designed to be someone, and so it's all a voluntary thing. If I install Covenant Eyes on my computer, I want to find an ally, someone who cares enough about me that they're willing to receive a check-in from me, a periodic check-in, and make sure that I'm not viewing pornography, basically. So when you get an ally who will get that regular check-in from Covenant Eyes, that they get that regular check-in then that tells them whether or not I'm viewing explicit material or not. And so that is pretty much how it works. I install the software, and I include in the sign-up process the email address of the person, and it's all done through an app. We have what's called the Victory app.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, the Victory app is entirely free. We have courses, we have a lot of resources available. Our mission is to beat pornography, work ourselves out of a job, basically. And that mission includes providing as much information as we can for free. There is a charge for the software once you download it, but everything else is freely available.
And so do you choose your ally, like, oh, my wife's going to be my ally, or are you assigned a stranger, or how does that work?
No, it really, it works best when it's someone who you know cares about you.
Okay.
And so, yes, a spouse, I would say probably the most common ally is a spouse.
Mm-hmm.
But then we also have friends. We have, like a men's group where each of them is, you can have as many allies as you want. And so each of them is an ally for all the others.
That's interesting. Like a men's group, You're all kind of holding each other accountable.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And holding each other accountable is exactly right. And so there's I knew back in the year 2000 when I first started Covenant Eyes, I knew it was going to work for me because I was going to have that over the shoulder experience with my sons, and that's what I was after, was preserving my family,
right?
Keeping them from pornography, or if they do see pornography, which everybody does, by the way. If they do see pornography, then how to deal with it? What do you do? That's the question. And so I knew it was going to work for me, but over the years we've developed statistics that really do show that accountability works. And one of the key pieces of evidence is we have nearly 1 billion images every year. And by the way, it's done through artificial intelligence. We analyze what's on the screen using artificial intelligence. And so that's what gets reported. We certainly don't transmit pornography to your ally. You don't have to worry about that.
They don't see what you saw or anything like that.
No.
Yeah.
We blur any images that are seen so that you can't really see what's there. And so the evidence that it works, we have over 1 billion images every month that we analyze. The analysis, by the way, is done on the user's computer. We don't actually analyze it on our servers or anything like that. We take the privacy of our members very seriously, and so we really want it as much to be done on the person's computer as possible to remain private. But now that we're getting scores for 1 billion images every month, 1 billion images with 300,000 users, we have a lot of data. That's a lot of data points.
Yeah.
And what we have found is that from the very first day of downloading Covenant Eyes software on the computer, from the very first day, 95% of our members don't cross the threshold into explicit material.
Wow.
In other words, it's only 5% actually
after the first day of installing it.
That's right. And considering that most people sign up for Covenant Eyes really wanting to stop any struggle or avoid it altogether, that's a pretty good record. Imagine if there was some sort of a patch or a drug to prevent smoking,
right,
that you could put on that was 95% successful the very first day.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking, while you were saying that, I'm thinking of other types of addictions where it would be impossible almost to just quit cocaine the day you do, like, I'm done with it today, never do it again. I'm done with alcohol, never do it. I mean, they go through withdrawals, they could have seizures. There's all kinds of things. Like, it's actually like a scientific way that you have to like wean them off of these things. But the porn addiction, that's so interesting to me, how easily, number one, how easily they can get into it, but number two, how easily they can get out of it.
Yeah.
That's really significant. And it almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost feels like that happens because watching pornography is something that's done in so secretly. And if someone knew their wife, their best friend, their whomever knew they were doing that, there's a level of almost like embarrassment or like, I don't want to be seen that way. And so it changes their behavior as soon as they're held accountable.
Yep. We have thousands and thousands of testimonials that say exactly that. I'm not sure whether this image would be explicit or not, but I don't think I should be looking at this.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Wow.
And as a result, it's hard in the modern world on the iPhone and the Android phone. It's hard for an app to get over a score of over 4 in the rating, and with tens of thousands of reviews, we score, I think it's 4.7 on the Android and 4.3 on the iPhone.
Wow.
So it's not just the data, the internal data that we have. Our members also praise it highly. They say it works.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just that accountability alone of someone knowing that you were doing this, it's interesting to me that you said that the majority of, let's say, the men that download this software, the ally that they put on there is their spouse. And there's 2 thoughts that came into my mind about this. One is like, okay, well, that would make me quit cold turkey because I wouldn't want my spouse to know I'm doing this. And so that is one of the reasons why it's so effective, probably, is because of who the ally is. But then it also makes me wonder, like, but what if they keep doing it? Like, then what, like, as the spouse who keeps getting these notifications that their husband or their wife or whatever is continuing to access these, like, what happens then? Because to me, that feels like that could be really even more damaging to the relationship.
Yeah, in those cases, usually the relationship is already pretty damaged. And we do get a lot of calls from people who are experiencing that. And we do have some resources for the spouse as well, the spouse who's going through that. It's not always just women going through that with husbands. Women are prone to be addicted as well. So it's just a difficult time. You talk about grief and tragedy and in your life, and there's, if I had to go through that, I'd almost rather lose my family than have to go through losing my family over a period of time to pornography. It would be devastating.
Wow.
It really would. It's the stories are tragic. They're just tragic.
Yeah.
And so Covenant Eyes works best for people who really are interested in giving it up.
Right. They realize it's a problem and they don't want it to be a problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's almost like the person who's like, I'm ready to go to rehab. I am accepting I have a problem. I have a drug addiction. I have a problem. I want to fix this. And they go check themselves into rehab.
That's right. It does not work if you're forced to use it.
Right. Like it's threatened. Like your, spouse is like, you're going to get on this or else.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We've actually had parole officers who have required their parolees to use it, and that does not work.
Yeah.
in fact, that is expressly forbidden in our user agreement.
Why is that?
It has to be someone who you're not forced to use it, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because if they're forced to use it and someone knows what they're doing and they don't want to stop, then I could see where that just continues to create conflict and chaos.
Definitely. Yeah. So that's, and if it's in a situation, here's another situation that is similar, but there are situations where the relationship between a husband and wife has gotten to that point where they've struggled with pornography over and over and over again, and the wife has just given up and is ready for divorce or already in the process of divorcing, and the husband actually does develop a sincere desire to give it up. And so in those cases, I would not recommend that the estranged spouse be the ally. Yeah. That would not be good. Find a pastor or a friend or someone who still cares about you But if it's already an estranged situation, I would recommend not having the spouse as an ally.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
just to get back, I I talked about these 6 coins that I have, and they clearly are a reminder of what happened to my family. And as I look at them, I think of the literally thousands, maybe tens of thousands of sincere testimonials that we've gotten. This is the part where I can get emotional because of people whose marriage has been saved. They write and they say, "You saved my marriage." And in some cases, "You saved my life." We actually get suicide calls.
Mm.
And in some cases, "You actually saved my life, thanks to Covenant Eyes." And I look at each one of those, any one of them alone would make it all worthwhile.
Mm.
Together, they are just a great, to me, a great legacy because, and I have to say, I started Covenant Eyes in the year 2000, and by the year 2002, the entire settlement that I got from the trucking company was gone. I didn't buy a cup of coffee at McDonald's. I was totally broke. I could see, I've been in business all my life, and so I could see we're going to make it. But boy, it was tight.
Yeah.
And that settlement came from the accident that my family died in.
Yeah.
Covenant Eyes came from that accident.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at every one of those saved marriages, every one of those saved lives as the legacy of my family. Someone whose marriage was saved, they're the legacy of my family.
Yeah.
And so if I could tell myself back when I first fell to the floor and worshiped in 1992, if I could tell myself there's going to be a great legacy here, that would have been a hope to cling on to, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I knew that there was a future. I trusted God in that. But now I can look back and say, yes, there really was hope. There really was a legacy to be established from even that tragedy, the worst of tragedies that you can go through. There's a legacy. There's a hope.
Yeah. It's a beautiful ripple effect of this family that you cherish so much, and how that was 3 people, and how those 3 people's short lives on this earth are impacting 300,000 and more and more and more and growing. I think that if that isn't a story of ashes to beauty and grief to hope, and true resilience, it's just, it's really, really remarkable.
Yeah. By the way, my journal is somewhere on the Covenant Eyes site. I think I sent you the link for that. Maybe you put it in the comments. And then,
so tell us about the journal.
Yep. And then there's also a video where I talk about, and there are even some pictures in there that I haven't shown. But if you go to covenanteyes.com and scroll down to the bottom, there's a history link at the way at the bottom. It says history. If you click on that, that'll take you to the video that I ran of just, it's part of the history of Covenant Eyes. It clearly is part of the history.
So if people want to know more about Covenant Eyes, they go to covenanteyes.com.
Right.
If they want to know, tell us about the journal. What is the journal and how do they get access to that?
The journal is it's on a Covenant Eyes website. I'll have to send you the link on that to include in the notes. But the journal, it's about 20 pages long. I kept a journal It really is a remarkable journal. I kept a journal for a few months after the accident. It wasn't daily. I wrote something when there was something significant to write, but it shows the walk that I had through grief. And there have been thousands of people who've read it, and it really resonates with people. If anybody happens to be going through grief right now, it is actually, there's a lot in there that you'll resonate with. It, like I said, thousands of people have read it and told me that.
Yeah, great. Well, Ron, it's been really incredible to spend this time with you and hear just this beautiful story of turning tragedy into good that, like you said, is building a legacy and continuing to help tons and tons, hundreds of thousands of families out there. And so I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to come on here and share your story with us.
Oh, Adrienne, thank you. I enjoyed it, actually.
Great. Thank you so much.